This is Scott Welch, Muscle Insider. We are here with Mike McErlane, co-CEO of JYM Supplement Science. How are you doing today, Mike?
Doing good, Scott. Thanks for having me. Pleasure.
Hey, listen, I understand that you're about to start your own podcast over at the JYM Supplement Science studio. Is that a bit of the background we got there with the bricks to sort of lay the foundation?
Well, now it is. I guess you say that. So we just myself and my senior video director, Mikey Mann, we kind of recorded our first episode. So we want to call it the Gym Life podcast. Nice. I think it's just with the amount of fans that we have that are pretty, front row audiences to the brand, they absorb a lot of not only just the content from Gym and everything, but kind of the lifestyle. Yeah. And so we've adopted that pretty hard internally. And I think there's just so many cool things that go on here in the office, with just even the local community. A lot of people come in and out and they love it here. And so a lot of the things that we do, we talk about behind the scenes stuff. I thought was just a cool idea to have a podcast where we just talk about everything, so it's just gloves off, unscripted, about this gym life and what this represents. It's more than a brand. It's just kind of like a way to live, a way to inspire, and in a way to really, unite different people from different walks of life has kind of been our experiences. And, times in which there's division just kind of all over the place. The one thing that unites us is obviously through fitness. So we just talk about not only just what's going on within the organization, things to come, what it's like maybe working with some behind the scenes stuff with Jim and some of the other projects we have. It's just a way for us to have a voice because Jim's so, as you mentioned earlier, many people don't know that Jim has a business partner, right? And that's not to say that I want that attention. Trust me, I don't want it. But at other times, because it's kind of becoming more of a, something that many people are aware of, a lot of people want to hear from me and, hey, what's going on with the business? Because I handle all the business stuff. So all the stuff that's not so glamorous, that's in front of a camera, but still, nonetheless, people still want a little bit of that information. And I'm a former athlete, motivational speaker type thing. So sometimes, what I say makes a little bit of a difference. And so this was just kind of our opportunity to do it. So we're excited about it.
Well, that brings us to this because this show is called Behind the Brand, and then we are going to do just that. Now, look at 2002 comes, you graduate with a degree in kinesiology, and then you end up working for Joe Weider at Weider Publishing with Flex Magazine and Muscle and Fitness, Hers, Men's Fitness, the whole gamut. What was that like?
It was unexpected, so as you mentioned, I graduated, I played college football, and I ended up graduating from California Lutheran University with 2 degrees. One was in sports medicine. The other, as you mentioned, was in kinesiology. And I was going down the route of a strength coach. I tried to make my way at some of the professional combine stuff. Actually, I retore my ACL. I tore it in college previously. And then I went to the LA Avengers, which was the Arena Football League, down here in Los Angeles. And I ended up re-injuring my knee. I was 21, 22. So I was like, well, I got to get a new job. I got to get a real job. And, looking at the landscape of the, personal training line of work, as well as, strength coach line of work. So I went and tested for my CSCS, a certified strength and conditioning specialist. And I was going to go pursue that. I worked with a lot of athletes when I was in college. So as I was playing college football, I was also the student head athletic trainer for the men's basketball team and the men's baseball team. So my ability to work with athletes, I loved it. And, but it didn't really have, I think, the long runway that I wanted in terms of a career. And randomly, I got approached at the gym. I was local 24-hour fitness, and this guy who you probably remember, Laya Clark.
Laya, from Hawaii.
Yeah, so Hawaiian, the Hawaiian Islander. So Laya, I met at the gym, and he was the one who hired me at Muscle and Fitness magazine. So he and I became close, and there was no interview process. He liked the way that we interacted at the gym, and I was, so he's like, hey, would you want to work for Muscle and Fitness magazine and Weider? And I said, sure.
Yeah.
And it was kind of, yeah, it was like a 6-month courtship. And so when I was 22, yeah, I got hired on, and I didn't even really know what I was there to do. I think the first week on the job, he handed me a stack of Muscle and Fitness magazine, and he said, go through here, and I want you to mark down how many protein ads there are, how many, fat burner ads there are, how many, like basically learn the
different categories.
Yeah, exactly. And, I didn't know at the time, but that was probably the single best exercise I could have ever had with an introduction to the industry, just because it made me familiar with these brands and the products. Because in college, it's like, you're young. I was a sports medicine guy. They didn't really teach you about supplements.
No.
If anything, they were saying get it from food, like every other academic
that's right.
institution. And so I didn't really, I took some products. I took, your creatine and I took protein, but I didn't really have an understanding of this industry. And so that was my first introduction. So working with them, it was an experience. I mean, Laia, it was just it still is an amazing individual. There's actually, part of that story in which he was supposed to be a part of this brand as well. But yeah, just an amazing guy. He took a chance on a kid right out of school, put me in a position I think that many people in the industry after I was, there for such a long time probably would have wanted.
Yeah.
And it was an exceptional opportunity. First week on the job, ran into Joe Weider right outside, my little cube area downstairs. And so it was cool. It was a surreal moment in time. I was there for 10 years and grew a lot. And I learned a lot and was awarded a wonderful opportunity to meet a lot of good people in the industry. Worked with hundreds of different brands who are now, most of them are my competitors. But, we had a really good time. It was a unique time in the industry, I think. And at that same year, that's when we also acquired the Mr. Olympia. So I had the opportunity to be a part of a very small team that ran the Mr. Olympia underneath the direction of Robin Chang, who I believe he's now working with Dwayne Johnson on his Athleticon.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was an experience. I mean, we were the Weider crew. It was just a very small group of people. And we had a very, very good run, I would say, for the time that I was there. And plus, it led me to where I am now with Stepani. So that didn't, suck too bad. So
for the consumer, and this is sort of paves the way a little bit for how your company is now, but the direct to consumer business kind of wasn't what it is now.
Right.
And the bodybuilding.com could move so much product. But the problem is that a lot of brands would sell to a distributor to then sell to a store, or they sell to a distributor who sells to a website who sells to the consumer. But you guys worked a way that you could sell the product in only one place at the time, I think, which was bodybuilding.com, which allows you to sell. And then it goes to, so it's only 2 steps, which allows you to sell a better formula, a more expensive formula at a similar price to what you'd get in retail, but you're actually getting a far more expensive formula because you've cut out the distributor and you've cut out the bricks and mortar retailer.
Right. And that's clearly accurate. And that's also one of the things that's still difficult about doing it the way that we were essentially, that was in our DNA, was to do things the right way with the right products. And how that actually happened, that same guy, Laia Clark, was initially part of this in the very beginning too. So I actually reached out to Laia. So, through the stint of our career at Muscle and Fitness, years went by, website was doing extremely well. People started globbing onto it. I started building out some other endeavors. The same platform that I built that was getting that custom workout experience for Muscle and Fitness, Jim, like, hey, can you do that for my website? And I said, sure. So I white labeled as a custom built backend. So I white labeled that for Jim. And actually that's how he and I really, we started working together in a business capacity where he and I partnered up on his website.
His training website, right? Training nutrition website.
Yeah. JYMstepani.com, which, was a membership based website to get access to his content. So that's what we started doing. And then that led into more conversations with like bodybuilding.com. Right. So now anytime that Jim would do content, it was always, hey, push it over to JYMstepani.com to get more. So right around 2012, I could kind of see the writing was on the wall with Muscle and Fitness. They had moved everything out they actually shut down the offices here in Woodland Hills. And Jim and I were pretty much the only ones left from the media side. And so everyone had, they either let go or replaced or have you. Jim obviously was one of the people who I, insisted we needed because he was such a huge part of content that we were monetizing. And so with bodybuilding, it just led to even like a more rapid style of a business relationship where I'm like, look, we need to do more with bodybuilding. And so after he already did his shortcut to size, which was the first installment of like the big Jim Stepani workout program on bodybuilding, and they monetized the hell out of that, good for them. We didn't have a supplement brand, but still,
sure,
the recommendations that Jim was making based on products weren't available. They weren't out there. Jim's telling you to take a pre-workout that has, a certain amount of ingredients. There wasn't one in the pre-workout space that existed. I mean, it was like a race to the bottom. And that's really what spawned Jim Supplement Science, was every product that we started seeing being commercialized and merchandised. Like when Jim would say, hey, you need a pre-workout to do this shortcut to, size.
Yeah.
The products that were being recommended were like 3 gram and 5 gram doses. Again, I'm not going to mention the brands,
sure,
but
yeah,
they were just nothing that Jim, and more importantly, there were no ingredients that should have even, given that product the classification of a pre-workout. I mean, it was like a drug, essentially. I mean, they weren't nutrients, there were other, types of chemical compounds or whatever that weren't necessarily what Jim would ever support. And that really, upset him. Yeah. And he's going, and I'm like, well, Jim, it's their business. We kind of did this, you did this content over here. So long story short, so after that problem had surfaced, we started, Jim actually left the magazine before I did. And so that kind of involved us in like, all right, even my runway is shortened. And so we just started talking with different people. I said, what if we were able to do this ourselves? And so I reached out to Laya. And so Laya, he had contacts on the manufacturing side. And long story short, we ended up at bodybuilding.com. And, bodybuilding, I had an idea. So I kind of like pre-planned some conversations to take place. Yeah. Because the process that we were originally going to go down, I didn't really like that model. There was a manufacturer we were going to work with. And essentially they were the ones who were going to be running the brand. Yeah. And I just wasn't down for that. And Jim at the time was like, hey, whatever you want, Mike, you make the call. And I really didn't even want that responsibility. Again, being the youngest guy in the room at all times for my entire career, I was always kind of the last one to speak. Not so much now, but so we went up to bodybuilding, and just based on preliminary conversations I had with their group, and John Hardesty, Ryan DeLuca, even Brian Rand, who helps run Cage Muscle now. It's an interesting story there, but I don't want to get into it. So those are the people who we kind of worked with to bring this to bodybuilding, and they were very interested in doing a brand with us, but they weren't interested in doing it the way that we had talked about, mainly because they thought it was such a good idea. Of course, they wanted exclusivity. Sure, but also, Jim's formula was just way too expensive to do it in a normal vendor retail relationship. And so once we kind of ran through the numbers and realized that it would be hard to bring this formula to market as is, when the competition would give. So a perfect example is we're looking to bring a 20 serve product to market. Yeah. Right. Everybody else in the category had, 30 to 60 serves, and the price point was like $30. Yeah. There was no way we could make this product and have that. It just wouldn't work. So the only way that we could was that if we, to your point, we went direct and essentially used bodybuilding.com as not only our exclusive launching partner, but also logistics partner. So I proposed an idea, and I originally said, look, you guys got to look at this. I don't know anything about logistics or operations, getting the product from the manufacturing facility to the warehouses and onto the consumer, I get that's a process.
Sure.
I don't know anything about it, but I know how to produce media. I know how to present Jim's content, and we know how to engage with the consumers and give them the right message that these products will, be pushed off and people would want to try them. And that's what we did. And so it was just Jim and I who, entered into this agreement. So we formed PhD Fitness shortly after we met with them. And then we started working on, this Jim brand and how we would kind of present it and the things that would go into bringing it to market. And so bodybuilding.com, we in exchange for the exclusivity, they would provide resources of operational and logistic support. So I didn't have to go and hire, a whole team of operation and forecasting experts to manage inventory. Essentially, Jim formulated the product. That product, went on to the manufacturer. We got costing, all the stuff like you would normally do.
Yeah.
And then once, we went through the process saying, okay, we're going to move forward with this, labels, all that. Then we just started getting the products made. And so bodybuilding would essentially have, the logistics to house the inventory, and then everything was exclusively there. And obviously once we set it in motion, off the races we went.
Now, at the heart of that formula, I mean, you mentioned 20 servings, but we're talking about huge doses, the effective doses of the key ingredients. And this is obviously pre-gym. We hear it called the different names that are there.
Yeah.
But what was the premise of that formula? Let's do exactly what Jim was taking, because in the Stacked interview, you mentioned how Jim was stacking his own, and we've done interviews with him in the past where he was making his own concoctions, and this was truly exactly what he takes, brought to you with the help of bodybuilding.com. Was that kind of the thinking?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Jim actually, there was more complexity into wanting to do like in a pre-workout that really, was just stacked up. But at that time, it was Jim, like for instance, like some of the ingredients are better to be taken, like a certain dose based on the science.
Yep.
Says this amount on a daily dose is the scientifically, legitimate sciencely backed, published studies.
Yeah.
And so Jim is very good about making sure that, that might be true. However, nobody talks about split dosing. Taking something all at once doesn't necessarily mean that it's better. Studies show a certain amount of BCAA is taken before at a certain ratio, 2 to 1 to 1, versus, after you train, 3 to 1 to 1. Those different ratios and those amounts, they do different things. So that's when it was really important to Jim to say, look, we have to make sure that there's bookended products pre and post. Mm-hmm. There doesn't exist a pre-workout, or at that time there wasn't a pre-workout that existed to where it was fully disclosed and transparent. Every single dose was there. It could stand on, the foundation of, having science behind it. Yeah. But more importantly, it was really to eradicate the concentrates that were being in the market. Yeah. And so we really, I zoned in on, okay, well, what are like the 5 most important ingredients that should be in a workout, Jim? And that's what's on the front of our label. And so our thing has always been the 5 must-haves. If you're taking a pre-workout and your pre-workout doesn't have, these 5 ingredients listed, BCAAs, beta-alanine, betaine, citrulline, in our case, citrulline malate, and, some form of creatine, it's like leaving out it's like leaving out squats or leg press if you're going to do legs, Yeah. So it's like, these are the ones that are probably going to give you the best chance of increasing strength, energy, endurance, because that's what people want when they want a pre-workout. The problem is that the pre-workouts at that time, they did one thing. They just like tunnel vision or gives you so much energy. You can just, that's a drug effect.
Yeah.
I want something that is legitimately going to help build muscle or increase strength or increase my endurance. And that type of stuff only comes by way of nutrients. And that's the way that Jim explained it to me. So yes, to answer your question, that formula was exactly what Jim had been long recommending. So if you look at all of the content he wrote for 10 years at Muscle and Fitness, and I got, around the office, I have, frames of the actual articles where people are like, oh yeah, in 2008, yeah, look what he was recommending. BCAAs at 6 grams, beta alanine at 2 grams, because there's a study is like 1.8 grams of beta alanine works. And so all these ingredients, and more importantly, the dose of these ingredients, he had long been recommending. And so that's what we did is he formulated that product. Now, granted, there were some other ingredients he was also looking at, but for costing wise, it's like you can't have $100 pre-workout. It's just not gonna, yeah. So the idea was to also make sure that the post-workout also had very similar ingredient profiles as you can see. So there's, in post-workout, there's creatine, there's BCAAs, there's betaine, there's beta alanine. And so those type of ingredients, when they're bookended, beginning of the workout and after the workout, it really does do what the promises of that company is saying, which are increased strength, energy, and endurance. And so there was more synergy in a system that Jim was focused on in terms of creating a product, not only just to fulfill the need for the category, but we're really the only brand where you can arguably take every single product we have in a day and you'd be just fine, because the ingredients are used in each one of those products that are meant to be taken with other ingredients, with the other products. And in some cases, there are ingredients that are left out because taking at the same time actually interfere with other ingredients that might be in that product.
Yeah, you mentioned before, like your multi is different than your ZMA, so that you're not having the magnesium and the calcium and the zinc in the multivitamin formula. So each one has a place in the portfolio. Now, sorry, go ahead. Yep.
No. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say now in terms of popularity, because you're in a lot of countries. I mean, I was over at FIBO and I saw your products throughout Germany. Obviously in Canada, they're all over the place thanks to your partners at Empire Health there. But how many countries is the JYM Supplement Science products in right now?
Specifically, to answer that question, and quite honestly, I don't know. Mainly because we have an international distribution partner that we work with, to where we don't deal with each individual country specifically. Obviously the UK, the UAE, we actually just partnered up with a manufacturing supply partner in India. So the goal is, as getting products into certain countries, especially with COVID right now, is extremely difficult.
Yes.
And extremely expensive. And in most cases, that expense is passed on to the consumer. And so before COVID, it was a little bit easier, just because we didn't have all the things that are going on now. Supply chain on every front has just been grinded down to an almost halt, specifically for protein and other ingredients. And so that's really put a strain on, the expansion of some of the international stuff. Canada has obviously been one of our largest and best partners on the international space, as you mentioned, Empire Health. So we're actually working with Empire and Peter and his group on looking at in-country manufacturing. It's a lot more efficient to have your products manufactured in those countries with qualified and vetted manufacturers than it is to have it manufactured here, ship it across, customs, lag time, delays. I mean, it's so difficult. So what we're doing now is we're looking at where we can. So yes, our products are in countries like, the EU, UAE, as I mentioned, Canada, South America, India. We're trying to look at, a better arrangement, much like I discussed with India and Canada and the UK, to where we're working with a partner out there. And again, this is stuff in progress. And so hopefully we can start getting the products manufactured out there, because even with regulations based on your claims or the ingredients, certain countries won't take the form. I mean, it's harder for us because, as you mentioned, our formulas pre-gym, if you add up all the BCAAs, it has 14 ingredients. Not every single one of those is going to be approved in certain countries.
That's right.
Certain countries don't have, yohimbe. You can't have huperzine. So, for instance, our EU version of pre-gym. Now, Jim, fortunately, is like, okay, if huperzine can't be in that formula, what can?
Sure.
And so he worked out the formula to where it's like, just as effective. You're not going to get anything less than the experience you would get normally from even the American version. But we just have to kind of play that game. So what we're trying to do right now is we're in all spots that we possibly can. Truth be told, the international side of the business has been something that hasn't been at the top of the priority list, mainly because, we can get into it if you want, but this brand has never really had the opportunity we've been through a lot because the way that we came into the market, that once we hadn't had a new product innovation in terms of a new formula of a category up until this year, since 2015. 2015, we were in pre-workout, post-workout, all the categories we're in. We didn't jump into a new category until this past year. So mainly because of all, I call them the distractions. Mm-hmm. But, when you come into the industry like what we did and the way that you did, we took a lot of market share because of the things that we were exposing was wrong with the products. Yeah. And that upset a lot of people, mainly because a lot of these people were mild accounts. So they knew Jim and I, and so they were a little jaded, to say the least. But we didn't do anything other than just making sure that the consumers were aware of the things that I had been exposed to because of Jim. And that was, I always had one vision or motive. And I tell Jim all this time, I'm like, if the consumers could see what I see through my eyes, it's game over, Oh, yeah. And so I'm always trying to absorb daily everything I can, but through the perspective and the lens of the consumer. That's the reason why I don't get involved too much on the science aspect of it. Like I know a lot more now than I did back then, but I don't pretend to be an expert in supplementation. That's Jim's job. That's why, he is who he is. And even Vince Andrich, Vince Andrich we brought on is our chief brand officer, and Vince has 35 years of experience working with brands and EAS and metrics, and the guy is just you can only get that much information with seat time, and so I don't pretend to have an expertise in areas I just don't. I know what I know, and I know it pretty good. But we have a lot of good people, and Jim obviously being just the science of this brand. And he doesn't have to look anything up. That's the other thing. You talk to him and he can cite studies that it's a Rolodex of information. I've never seen anything like it.
And you know what? Looking at the formula, I see branded ingredients there like carnosine and the different ingredients there. Would you say that the quality of the ingredients themselves is a trend that's happening now, and it's more important than ever? People are turning the label, and with COVID removing a lot of the good ingredients from the market and the shortages that are happening, obviously the consumer isn't aware, but a lot of these ingredients are being replaced by cheaper forms of these ingredients. That I know that there's ingredient supply companies that are selling raw materials sight unseen, no certificate of analysis, and either take it or leave it because there's such a shortage that there's other customers who would be taking it. But Jim Supplement Science obviously has a reputation. So how important is the quality of the raw materials that go into every Jim Supplement Science product?
Well, to answer that question, I'll hit it with a story. How's that?
Sure.
Okay. So recently, I mentioned we just jumped into some new categories that we hadn't been in before.
Yeah.
So we just launched our bar.
Your bar, I saw that. Yeah.
And cat a little bit out of the bag on this one, but I'm hopeful that Jim will be able to get in front of it before this goes to broadcast. So a perfect example is our bar, right? And so Jim, when it comes down to ingredients and sourcing and the transparency, as well as the the quality of what he wants, right? He has standards. And so the bar being one of them, it took us, I mean, we've been working on this thing for 5 years. The one thing that's good and bad about Jim is the fact that, you know, he's a scientist. That's what's really good. The bad thing about it is he's a scientist. And so when I mean that, the bad is that other brands move at a pace and are able to kind of like problem solving a lot quicker based on, to your point, like supply problems, where Jim is like, well, we're just not going to create that anymore until I get the ingredients I want. So the bar being a prime example, you know, we just launched this bar. It was like the Impossible Bar. I don't know if you've had a chance to try it or not.
I haven't tried it yet. I've seen it online.
Well, we will definitely make sure to get you a couple boxes.
Okay.
Because, so, you know, it took us a very long time to get this bar together. I call it the Impossible Bar because it's like building a sandcastle without any water. There's nothing holding it together. Which is really good. But, you know, most bars, they use ingredients, even in the protein, you know, we are staunch at like against whey protein concentrate.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is just the percentage of the protein that's in concentrate. Not saying that you're going to get sick or anything, but it's just, you know, some people, they always complain like, well, I have stomach issues and I can't drink protein. And I said, turn the bottle around, it probably has whey protein concentrate. And what that is just that to your consumers, I know you know this, Scott, but a large part of that protein is actually lactose. And so most people can't handle that. So Jim's stance is, because he particularly can't take whey protein concentrate, he's not going to advise anybody else does. Whey protein isolate is just, it's a higher quality and a much more expensive type of protein.
Yeah.
So we don't use cheap ingredients, to your point. So this bar was like the Impossible Bar because it could not contain whey protein concentrate. Jim did not want any sugar alcohols in there for the same reasons, and he wanted, you know, only like 1 gram of sugar. So really, there wasn't much holding the bar together. And so the coating that we actually used, once again, it's not a protein source, but most of the bar coatings, if they're chocolate and stuff like that, they will use certain ingredients which Jim wasn't okay with. Whey protein concentrate being one of them. There was actually little crisps in our bar, and the original formula that we kind of came up with, the whey crisps, had whey protein concentrate, and Jim's like, no. And
even in the crisps, that's crazy. That's awesome. Good for you.
Yeah, he won't do it. And so it came in. So we finally got this bar manufactured, and you know, we launch it. It's out there, and get a call from the manufacturer. He's like, hey, look, you know, because of COVID, we don't think we can get this coating anymore. You know, the supply for the coating that doesn't have whey protein concentrate in it. And so and he's like, you know, look, hindsight, it's an ingredient. It's not a protein source. And it's such a minuscule amount, like it's not going to cause issues based on what Jim has always said. And I'm like, yeah, I know what he's going to say. And I know what I would say too, but clearly it's Jim, you know, so everything goes through him to make sure that, I mean, he's got to get he's got to be the yes vote.
Yeah.
So this information passed his desk, and he goes, well, till we can get the coating, I guess we won't have a bar anymore, will we? Just doesn't care.
Wow.
You know, he's like, I'm not gonna sacrifice my integrity of my position and what I've actually said to my consumers to create a workaround that I'm not okay with. And so I think, you know, with that, it's from a business side, you're like, gosh, you know, it's going to be tough. But, you know, realistically, you have to respect it. And I think that's the type of quality that at least the people who work for the organization now, in some cases, there's frustration because we don't move at the speed of other brands launching things because, you know, these are complex formulas. And if he can't get the ingredients that he wants, he's just not going to do it. I mean, it's why it took us, I'm not joking, Scott, we worked at least 6 or 7 different manufacturers to try and get, you know, the right bar. And he, and myself included, you know, didn't want something that was already in the marketplace from just the experience a consumer has when they taste it. And So we have this incredible bar, and we're still selling it right now, but that's the reason why you won't see new flavors right now for quite some time. We're hoping that once we get through the year, we can get more of this material that goes into the coating so that we can start, expanding that footprint, because I mean, this bar is just flying right now. And the only place that I can sell it is on our own website. GNC of course wants it, and bodybuilding and this bar, the thing about it is that we can actually take it multi-channel. Because right now, contractually we are exclusively sold brick and mortar with GNC domestically. So this bar I can be in every convenience store and gym in America, but it's just not right now. We're having supply issues.
Well, Jim doesn't seem, and you guys don't seem like a company who really has to compromise. And that's one of the problems. When I was at Muscle Tech, I was there for 6.5 years, and you grow to a certain state where then you get to the point where, hey, Walmart US calls you. Hey, we want this product. We want this product. And you get to this point where the order is so large that sometimes you start to make deals with yourself, and you start to justify, hey, this is good for the brand. It's going to bring new consumers in. And things have changed a lot. You can get serious sports nutrition in a Walmart. You can get, some better products than what we saw back when you guys first started, and obviously way beyond what when you first got in the industry in the early 2000s. But I kind of feel that the success of products like your pre-gym has have risen the bar where you always have the knockoff companies that knock it off. But I think that in the bar case, there's roughly 4 contract manufacturers that make most of the bars. So they're all very, very similar. So if you have a Stepani who wants to do something different, then that doesn't really fit. And unless you're a bigger brand like you guys, then they're not going to listen. But it's good that you have that brand power, and that the obviously the digital army, the gym army out there that's supporting you, so that you don't have to cut corners and you can sell efficacious products. Speaking of that, you guys are known obviously for the pre-workout. Your protein is quite popular. I saw that you have a gainer, you have a dextrose powder. Like, there's things there that I actually didn't know you had such a wide assortment of products. One that I'm really impressed by is the SS8, the Super Shredded 8 fat burner. And I believe that's your second fat burner, if I'm not mistaken. Tell me a bit about that, and how's that been in the marketplace?
Yeah. Truth be told, it's, I can only take half dose for myself. It's, so our original formula, or Jim's original formula shred, at the time, if you go back to some of Jim's content, especially when it came to fat loss, it was probably one of the most popular categories of products and ingredients that he always recommended. Yohimbe and even Grains of Paradise were always ingredients he talked about. And he would make those recommendations of, taking, green tea and all the stuff in there, in both shred as well as and if you look at shred and SS8, the profiles are somewhat similar, right? In terms of, some of the main active ingredients. He specifically left out Yohimbe and Grains of Paradise of the shred formula, which was the original one, because when Jim was doing Shortcut to Size at bodybuilding.com, he would get, people saying, I can't take Yohimbe, because it's just too much and all that. And so that's why he opted for synephrine, so he used synephrine instead of Yohimbe in the original shred formula. So because of that, recently when we got into GNC originally had shred, and then, they opted not to take that product anymore because of the ingredient profile, right? So, so bodybuilding was the only place that really carried it, but the category for fat loss, obviously in GNC, is monstrous. And so they were really saying, like, look, we really need a fat loss product. And so I had a conversation with Jim, and Vince Andrich did too. And we said, look, Jim, the shred formula is actually a very good formula, but I think we place the price point. I mean, there's virtually like a break even for us on that particular product. A very expensive form. The cost of ingredients, as you know, fluctuate and they went up. So we talked about it. And I said, Jim, like I'm not joking. I pulled up an article of Muscle and Fitness, and where he had all those listed ingredients, and Yohimbe grains of paradise being one of them. And I'm like, dude, like you wrote about this, like why don't we just create this? It's a better version of Shred from the standpoint of what's in it. Obviously it would have to be a higher price point, but this could fit the market because it just, if you take that product, and so we thought about it, and he goes, I'm just a little concerned about putting Yohimbe because some of the feedback I got from years ago. And Vince said something very, very intelligently. So he said, Jim, he says, think about this. He goes, how many people do you think downloaded your workout program, shortcut the size and took your recommendations? And from our stats, it was like in the millions, right? Yeah. And Vince goes, did you get millions of people saying they couldn't take Yohimbe? Or was it just maybe, less than 100? That's true. And Jim said the same. Jim goes, yeah, you're right. He goes, minority rule, bro. He's like, don't be afraid to throw something in there that you recommend, even if some people say they can't do it. So that's what he did. So he formulated that, and then we called it SS8 because the most popular workout program that we have on Jim's website is called SS8, which is Super Shredded 8. Yeah.
I didn't know that's where the name. That was going to be one of my later questions was how you came up with the name. That's really cool.
Yeah. I give all credit to Luke Thompson and Vince Andrich on that one. So they were the ones who took that project from the branding perspective of how we're going to bring it to market. And as I mentioned before, we have this website, jimstepani.com, which gives all of Jim's workout programs. And, it's all app-based. I mean, it's a stellar website, and we're putting so much resources into making that website even better. So we have thousands of people using this site. And every time that we do these challenges, every 3 months, we throw out a challenge, say, hey, go do this workout program. Here it is. Get it now. And then upload your images along the way. And the winners, what we used to do was fly them out here. They do a winner's weekend. They get to train with Jim. We do, it was out to Hollywood, California. Since COVID, we've been giving away $10,000 prizes. So we actually just wrapped one up. So Jim just announced the $10,000 winner last week. I believe it was Ryan Paulson, if I remember correctly. So congratulations to him. But SS8, every time we would do this program, it would be the largest footprint of people joining. And the results, I've never seen anything like it. I mean, it's just, and really the program, it happens to be my favorite program Jim's ever written. I call it like his Picasso. Like that is his Sistine Chapel, of a workout program. And so the idea is call it SS8, kind of get the co-branding, Super Shredded 8, and 8 because it worked out just coincidentally, not purposeful, that there's 8 ingredients in SS8.
I'm looking at the formula here. You've got chromium in here, and you're using the branded version of the Chromax. You got the acetyl L-carnitine, phenomenal ingredient. L-tyrosine, obviously pretty standard for that whole nootropic. Green tea leaf, and you've even disclosed your EGCG content, which is good. Caffeine, this is interesting. I like the 300 milligrams of caffeine, but what's interesting is you have a fast release, which is the anhydrous, I believe, and then the time release, and you've actually disclosed the breakdown. So it's not going to have that crash. Capsimax version of cayenne pepper. So obviously for a thermic heat effect. Grains of Paradise, obviously by NNB Nutrition, the Calorie Burn GP. They are a phenomenal company that obviously a lot of companies are using now. I like this because you're actually standardizing the Grains of Paradise. So if you're going to get that brand adipose tissue stimulation, and a lot of the Grains of Paradise I'm seeing in the market is adulterated. So they're spiking it with, some of the different components inside that. So the paradoxal. So it's good that you guys have gone with this. This purity of here is important, obviously. And then you've got the Yohimbe at 5 milligrams. This is Yohimbine, sorry. So
Yeah.
together, and that Yohimbe with the caffeine is going to have that synergistic effect. I like the fact that you've combined the Capsimax with the calorie burn. That's a really great thermic effect that consumers are going to get. So phenomenal. Obviously, it's Jim Stepani. How does it get better?
It's a good start. Well, it does get better. I mentioned the program. So what we actually did as a marketing kind of creative concept with that product is that every single person who gets that product, they get the workout program for free. 100%.
Oh, very cool. Very,
so
very
inside,
helpful.
yeah, I should have grabbed it. But so inside that box that the SS8 comes in, there's a card with a QR code. And you scan that card, and that code you just enter. So it takes you into a separate login to jimstepani.com. Essentially, it gives you 2 months for free of the entire site, but it drops you right into that program. So ideally, it's like if you take this product and you do this program, I mean, just, it's insane. It is absolutely. And I will say this, you know, as I mentioned, like for me, that SS8 product, I have to kind of split the dose up myself. But if you take that product and you do that program in 8 weeks, because it's an 8-week program, I promise you, if you're looking for a result now, I will say this: if you're not up for the work, it's just not for you.
Sure.
I mean,
that's how fat burners work. They don't do it by itself.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the other thing too that we also talked about is with this particular product too, is we wanted to make sure that there was some type of what to do, because as you mentioned, look, there's no magic pill. Anybody's listening saying, oh, I need a fat burner just to lose weight. It's not going to happen. You know, these supplements are exactly what they are. They will enhance the results, but based on the work that's put in there and in a proper nutritional and, you know, a program that goes along with it. But I will say SS8, you don't even have to follow that a nutrition program and you're going to get shredded. I can attest to it. It's one of the best programs that literally I think Jim's ever written. And so that's where the whole concept of SS8 came up from. But the idea was to really fill that void that had left the GNC category. And so that's the reason why we, Jim kind of resurfaced with a new fat loss product. That was just it's like shred that's what I take, shred, you know, but SS8 is like, if you want that another level of, you know, energy and performance and obviously enhanced with it. You know, you mentioned the different caffeine in there. And so for anybody who's listening, the reason for that is because the nice thing about the sustained release in most fat loss products or anything that's a stimulant is you usually get like a pretty good jolt right out of the gate. And then sometimes people crash. Right.
Yep,
and so at least with the caffeine, Jim used the same concept of the protein blends where you have different digestion rates. You have the whey isolate, which, you know, kind of spikes and then comes down, but then you have that nice slow release of casein, which is sustained over a longer period of time. And so the same thing with that combination of the caffeine as well as the time release is that, yes, you have that nice initial jolt, but then you kind of like still have that, you know, initial ongoing surge of energy so you don't fall off. Because that was one of the things when people start taking things, especially in combinations with, you know, stimulants, is that they get that jolt, but then they kind of get that foggy crash afterwards.
Yeah.
And so, you know, he was cognizant of that. And so that's the reason why he did the mix of the two. And we've actually really liked that combination. So in new product ideas and development, I think that might be a combination Jim opts to use in down the line with some other formulas that we've kind of talked about internally.
And now in terms of contract manufacturers, how important is choosing the right manufacturer? Because you mentioned obviously in the bar category, you know, you had to find the right partner that was willing to work on his specs. How important is that to your overall, you know, principle of business?
Well, it's really important. I mean, you know, as you mentioned, there was only a handful of bar manufacturers. You know, as you know, it's like, you know, you go to one bar manufacturer and they do like the multi-layer bar and that's all they do, right? And same thing with like the extruded bars or the Quest type bars. You know, every manufacturer's like they can do any bar that you want, right? The machines, as you know, the machines only do certain bars. So we don't look at things like auction ourselves and like that. So we actually, the bar manufacturer we worked with, you know, a new manufacturer who just had a new way to do some bars and hadn't really been seen in our industry. And so they checked every box that we wanted in terms of how we, the type of bar. Because again, the texture of this bar just doesn't exist. You're not going to, and the nice thing about it is, we will be the only brand for a certain period of time to have this type of bar. So every category that we go into, we always say, okay, before we just throw our hat in the ring, can we fix it? Is that category broken? And most of them, not all of them, but most of them are. There are things that we would do differently that separate our products away from what's currently offered and available. So the manufacturing is very important. First of all, I would always make sure, and there's ways to, brands can disclose if their manufacturing facilities are NSF Sports certified.
Yeah.
Obviously, you want an FDA compliant facility where they get, random audits. And so choosing the manufacturer, it usually comes down to, what standards of certification and GMPs you actually have. And GMPs, for those of you who don't know, is good manufacturing practices, right?
Yeah.
There's a large amount of them which operate under those guidelines, but some don't. Not all of them do. And so our partnership with our manufacturers, it really comes down to making sure that those things are checked, those boxes are checked, to make sure that they're, the testing of all the ingredients and qualifications and, every single thing that could go wrong. You want to make sure you've already vetted that to rule it out before you put something in a bottle and pass it on to a consumer. So all of these manufacturers that we work with are best in class. And then it really just comes down to making sure that they can continue to fulfill the demand.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, no one manufacturer produces just one brand. They're usually working with multiple brands. And so getting the time to produce the products that you need to fulfill whatever demand there is in the marketplace is important. Because especially what's happened with the last several years, we were like the only pre-workout on the market at the time that would use the amount of ingredients. And so they were harder to get, right? Mm-hmm. And so when a manufacturer is, let's say, using, creatine, and that happens to be creatine, and their majority of the people who they manufacture for use monohydrate, they have a large stock of monohydrate.
Sure.
So it's easier to get that into your formula because they got a lot of it. But in our case, when you're using creatine hydrochloride, there's not a lot of brands that were using that at the time. Now there are, because we kind of standardized it. But at that time, there really weren't. And so it was harder to get. And so you had to make sure that not only were the standards and the efficacy, and the, all the, actually losing my train of thought here, but all the standards and certifications that a manufacturer should have, you also have to make sure that they can get you the material, and that they can get enough of it to where it's not an economically disastrous decision for them to go ahead and have that. Because if you buy, a certain amount of, say, creatine hydrochloride, and you don't use it in time, well, that stuff will expire. So, and every raw material supplier has minimums that you usually get. So the nice thing about our process is that most of these raw ingredient suppliers know who JYM is. Yeah. And JYM can make an ingredient something, or he can really make sure that ingredient doesn't do anything. And I think that's what we do in muscle and fitness. I mean, you mentioned carnosine, you mentioned in concrete, which are the branded forms of the beta alanine as well as creatine. JYM was large in part a big reason why you see a lot of those branded forms of ingredients in products. Now, there's specific reasons why brands use them. Some are not just because they want the standard form. Large in part, in many cases, that branded form of that ingredient, they have basically IP that they're the only ones who can supply that ingredient. But what they do is they fund a lot of the research to make sure that that ingredient, it is what it is and it does what it does. Sure. And so they have access to the claims. So if you're making claims on certain ingredients, typically, if you're using an ingredient that's a branded form, that brand would have kind of the IP associated with those claims being made on that one ingredient. So the nice thing is Jim is able to market that. What I just said probably doesn't sound like too much fun to a consumer or make much sense, but what Jim does is Jim essentially commercializes the science, so people know that whatever he's talking about has legitimate science to back it up. So when he says, take this at this dose, it works, here's the research that shows it does, essentially he's able to articulate that in a way that a consumer can walk away feeling good about the product they're taking.
But it's really interesting because companies like NNB Nutrition, where they're doing the research on this, they're extracting it, they're purifying it, they're patenting it in some cases. There's a lot of other good companies out there like Natural Alternatives who have done that with Carnison. This is allowing consumers to have trust. This is allowing people like Stepani, who, if they put this into a product, they know that this is actually meeting label claim. This is free of banned substances, etc. And I think that more branded ingredients should be across the board for all companies, because I think that when the consumer pays for that quality, the brand gets rewarded when they put the branded ingredient in, and then they can put more better products out. I mean, at the end of the day, there's a lot of things coming in from China, India, etc. Nothing against those countries, but we do not know with the standardization, if there is any standardization going on there, and we don't know if things are safe, and it's really good to see companies like yours using brand ingredients, because I think that this allows the consumer to know. I also think it's great that companies like Informed Choice and NSF have gotten involved in this category to sort of test to make sure that if a consumer uses this product, that there's not a banned substance that's in here. And I applaud that companies like that are helping. They're in the supplement industry, but not in the traditional sense like you are as a brand. They're kind of one of the partners that helps make a brand more successful. Thank you so much for taking some time to talk to us. We really appreciate it. We have gone truly behind the brand, thanks to our sponsor, NNB Nutrition, and thanks to JYM Supplement Science, obviously, for taking the time and really sharing a story with us today. Has been great. And we're looking forward to it. Now, where can fans go to get the full Monty, everything to do with JYM Supplement Science?
Sure. So our website is JYMSupps, JYMSupps, JYMSupps.com, or JYM Supplement Science if you want to really type it out. So that's our main website, JYMSupps.com. Products are available exclusively GNC stores, brick and mortar. So if you want to go to the store and pick it up off the shelf, GNC would be the partner that to go get, as well as online. We're available at Amazon.com, bodybuilding.com, vitaminshop.com, and in Canada, supplementking.com, as well as Popeye's locations up in Canada. So as Scott mentioned, there's a lot of different locations up there in Canada for you guys to get options to find out more about the products and give them a try.
There you have it. Mike McErlane from JYM Supplement Science. Thanks for taking some time today to meet with us.
Absolutely, Scott. Thank you.